As I'm recording this, the NFL free agency world is absolutely on fire. And looking at some of the moves that have just happened, I think there's a chance suddenly that Josh Sweat can return to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2025. I'll tell you why coming up next, right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. The NFL world is on fire. DK Metcalf just got traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Josh Allen signed a mega extension worth $255 million guaranteed. Here comes a Jalen Hurts extension. I think Devontae Adams going to the Rams. Myles Garrett just signed an extension with the Browns. Harold Landry to the Patriots. A flurry of reports around the NFL world within the last hour or two. Tomorrow is the first real day of NFL free agency. The legal tampering window opens up at noon. The storm is going to continue. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think, will be a part of it. I don't think as aggressive as they've been in years past, but one move I think could suddenly happen more, that's suddenly more realistic than I've thought it was for weeks, is the possibility of Josh Sweat coming back and signing an extension to keep him in Philadelphia throughout 2025 and beyond. Like, looking at a lot of these signings, yes, you see what Myles Garrett got in Cleveland. $40 million a year. The most money a non-quarterback has gotten annually in the history of the NFL. I can't imagine what Jamar Chase's deal is going to look like with the Cincinnati Bengals. I digress. You look at the edge group, though, as a whole, that contract obviously shows what the going rate is for an elite pass rusher. But we know Josh Sweat is not Myles Garrett. We know the NFL world doesn't see Josh Sweat in the same light as Myles Garrett. You look at what Harold Landry just got from the New England Patriots, 3 years, $46 million, $14.5 million a year. That deal is actually what made me start to think more about Sweat's market than Myles Garrett, who's one of the greatest NFL players of all time at his position. Looking at what Harold Landry got, looking at how oversaturated this edge market has become, I suddenly think that it's not a slam dunk that Josh Sweat is gone. I'm starting to think he could be back. And look, I know he hired Drew Rosenhaus, one of the biggest names in the world of sports agencies, right before the Super Bowl, and he wants his bag. He talked about how this is the biggest moment of his life, coming off a historic Super Bowl performance. He is going to want to get paid. And we thought for weeks he's going to. He's going to get $20+ million a year. The Eagles just can't compete. Why would they? There's a lot of other cheaper options in free agency. It's a loaded draft class for the edge rusher position. It felt as good as gone when it comes to Josh Sweat's chance of coming back to Philadelphia. Especially with, you have Nolan Smith and Jalen Hunt still in-house. Like, it felt like he was going to be gone. Of the big four free agents the Eagles had hitting the open market, Zach Bond, Mekhi Becton, Josh Sweat, and Milton Williams, I thought the least likely outcome was Sweat coming back of those four players. Now, I think it might be the most likely when it comes to Sweat, Milton Williams, and Becton. Looking at how defensive tackles are getting extensions this week for $20+ million a year on the open market. You look at the Dallas deal that just happened this week with their starter. I'm not going to try to say his name, but he got over $20 million a year. Milton Williams, I think, is probably as good as gone. Apparently, he hasn't been in contact with the Eagles front office for a bit. Mekhi Becton, I just saw a report as well from Pete Prisco that says the guard market is going to explode. Good players are going to get, quote, great money. Mekhi Becton might have a giant market. I don't know if he's going to be back. When you look at how many edge rushers are available, when you look at what a similar tier player in Harold Landry got, he is, again, Josh Sweat is not a Myles Garrett. I think in the open market he's going to get overpaid for who he is, but I think NFL teams know that Josh Sweat's not a true Alpha 1 edge rusher. I think they know he's more of a good, not great edge rusher. I think he is in that tier with a Harold Landry. Harold Landry gets $14.5 million a year. I think Josh Sweat's contract now And who knows? It might still be $20+ million a year. We'll find out tomorrow when he's going to agree to a contract somewhere, even if it's not in Philadelphia. Is it going to be 20 plus? If I'm a betting man, I might say now it's closer to that 16 to 20 range. I don't know if he surpasses $20 million a year annually. And if it's suddenly a $16 to $20 million a year contract for Josh Sweat, is it still possible the Eagles say, no, thank you, too rich for our blood for who he is? We're still going to go draft a player and sign a cheaper player. In free agency, I could totally see that still being their plan. But $16, $20 million a year, that puts the Eagles in play. I think they can start to talk to Josh Sweat in that range. They were not going to give him the deal that originally we thought his market would command, that maybe he even thought his market would command. But if it's a $16 to $20 million a year contract, suddenly sign me up to have Josh Sweat back in 2025 and have it be him, Nolan Smith, and Jalix Hunt, your big 3 edge rotation of your Super Bowl season. You keep them heading into next year. You still draft another edge rusher as well and get a 4-man rotation like you traditionally do. I think it's suddenly back on the table. And I think it's more, again, when I was ranking the likelihood of these free agent possibilities, I would have said there's a better chance Milton Williams is back, certainly Zach Bond, who now is extended, and Mekhi Becton. Now, I think there's a better chance Josh Sweat is back than Mekhi Becton and Milton Williams, considering what those markets are shaping out to be on the interior of both the offensive and defensive line. And again, how oversaturated the edge market is. There are so many options. When you look at guys that I really like, younger players that might be cheaper, like a Darrell Taylor or a Malcolm Kuntz. You look at veteran big names like Khalil Mack, Harold Landry, who just signed with the Patriots, now off the market, but he was available. Joey Bosa got released by the Chargers. He's on the open market. You had Baron Browning before he just signed. Who else? Chase Young is a free agent. Hassan Reddick. The list goes on and on. There are so many guys that are available. Von Miller, not that I want him, considering his off-the-field stuff, but Von Miller just got released, and he had a really good pass rush win rate last year. There are a lot of pass rushing options for the entire NFL to choose from. I just don't know if a team is going to say, Josh Sweat, you're worth $22 million a year compared to giving Chase Young $15.5 million a year. And so maybe his market is not what he expected, not what we expected. And Howie Roseman starts to say, hey, I can do this. 15 to 20, let's talk. Suddenly, let's reopen negotiations and see if Josh Sweat could be back. Again, it's not about Josh Sweat, the player. In a vacuum, I would love to have him back. He's only 27 years old. He led the Eagles in sacks last year. He had one of the greatest Super Bowl performances I've seen from a non-quarterback. He wrecked that ball game. He probably should have won Super Bowl MVP if it wasn't for Jalen Hurts' huge second half. He was one of the main reasons you won a championship. I'd love to have him back. I just thought his market was going to be stupid. And I thought the way he was talking, and again, bringing in an agent, a new one, a big name agent, and Drew Rosenhaus, who we know represented guys like Terrell Owens and Deshaun Jackson when it comes to past Eagles, when you do that right before the Super Bowl, that screams, I'm not taking a team-friendly discount. And that was telling me he's as good as gone. Suddenly, I don't think that's the case. And that's exciting. It's just another option for the Eagles at this position that I didn't think was likely. There are so many guys out there. Again, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Von Miller, Chase Young, Malcolm Kuntz. There's a lot of guys. Josh Uche. So I think the Eagles are absolutely going to add a pass rusher tomorrow, whether it's Josh Sweat or somebody else, to rotate through with Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith. And I really do think they're, no matter what, going to invest a high pick at that position. We'll see what happens, but Josh Sweat's market, very curious to see how that plays out tomorrow. One thing I did notice today as well, being thrown around when it comes to reports about what could happen this week in a crazy time in the NFL, is the idea that the Philadelphia Eagles could be on the verge of trading tight end Dallas Goedert. That, I think, would be a big mistake. I'll tell you why coming up next, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. an expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, the NFL world is on fire. There have been like 10 huge moves that happened today. Tomorrow is technically the start of all of this with the legal tampering window opening up at noon. You'll hear a lot of verbally agreed contracts with UFAs. Of course, they can't officially sign until Tuesday, but buckle up. There's going to be a lot of news. We've got 5 podcasts for you here, getting you ready for everything the Eagles do and recapping it Monday through Friday. Like I said, I think suddenly there's a chance that tomorrow the Eagles could bring back Josh Sweat, considering how oversaturated this market is and looking at Harold Landry's contract he got today, a very similar tiered pass rusher to Josh Sweat, getting $14.5 million a year, 3 years, $46 million with the New England Patriots. I think that's a possibility now, again, that Sweat's back. Somebody that could be on the outs from that 2018 draft class is star tight end Dallas Goedert. I saw multiple insiders today discussing the potential idea of the Eagles trading away Dallas Goedert and what his market would look like at 30 years old, 1 year left in his contract, pretty much no guaranteed money left. Coming off a historically good playoff run for the tight end position, Dallas Goedert was incredible. I know I throw that word around lightly, loosely, historic, but I thought he was incredible during the playoff run. It sounds like the market could be a 4th-round pick if the Eagles decide to trade Dallas Goedert. And when you zoom out, when you don't add context to the situation, yes, trading a player that's 30 years old with as many injuries as Dallas Goedert's had in his career, considering he can't really play a full season, like he's not playing a full 17-game schedule. Like he's going to get injured. Like I said, he's 30 years old, 1 year left on his deal, no guaranteed money left. He's going to want another big contract. It's a deep class at this position in the draft when it comes to tight end. There's a lot of intriguing options in the first 2 rounds and then throughout all 7 rounds of the 2025 NFL draft. Yeah, when you add all of that up on top of you being a contender and you have to save some money because of all these big contracts coming up, yes, normally you don't pay a 30-year-old with that kind of injury history and bank on him still being really good for another, 3 to 4 years on a new contract. Like that's the type of move Howie Roseman would have made post 2017 and 2018, 2019, and normally that didn't work out. So in that way, if you can get a 4th-round pick for that player, normally I'd say sure. I think that's the smart, responsible way to do it. And if that's the way the Eagles move with this Dallas Goedert situation, I would understand that logic. However, with all that being said, I want Dallas Goedert back next year in Philadelphia. I want Dallas Goedert on my football team. I know everything I just laid out screams be responsible and move on from that player. I know that. But Dallas Goedert being on my offense with my quarterback is good for business. I would try to make it work. And yes, I'm not letting him reset the tight end market when it comes to the contract. I'm not paying him a top 3 tight end contract, considering his injury history, considering his age, considering the draft class. No, considering the Eagles situation, they have to be very responsible with this, but they should try to make it work. I wouldn't be hell-bent on saying we're going to move off him no matter what. I hope Howie Roseman, maybe he's doing this because he knows it's not going to work. He knows Dallas Goedert's agent is going to want to get him an elite contract coming off that Super Bowl season. Maybe that is what happens, but I would hope that they're at least open to the possibility of him returning next year. You know what I'm saying? I think he's still a top 5 tight end when he's on the field. And I think you can have your cake and eat it too. You can bring in a long-term replacement like you did in 2018 when you had Zach Ertz. You still got to use him for another, 3.5 seasons, and you had Dallas Goedert waiting in the wings. You had both. And then after Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert was your seamless long-term replacement. You can still do that. You can still draft a tight end early this year, But I also want to have Dallas Goedert back for the next few years because I don't think he's shown, even with the injuries, any signs of slowing down. I think this was the best season of Dallas Goedert that we got when he was on the football field. Going back to that Saints game, week 3, looking at the playoff run, I want them to try to make it work. And maybe there isn't a middle ground between these two sides, between Goedert and the Eagles. Maybe the Eagles just aren't willing to really budge. They have a very disciplined set number, and it's just not going to meet his talent and what he could get with another team. But I wouldn't just be so hell-bent on moving him regardless of the situation. Like, I hope this isn't a black or white thing where the Eagles are saying we're moving on and we're actively shopping him. Like, sure, you take calls on a player like that. If a team is interested in Dallas Goedert, of course you're listening, considering the situation. But I think he is such a good football player, and he is so important for Jalen Hurts. I think he is the one guy that Jalen trusts throwing over the middle of the field on third downs, the run after the catch ability. He's an elite blocker. He's a deep threat at this position. He's clutch. Again, he's one of the best playoff performers for this position in NFL history when it comes to playoff statistics. He was a huge reason you won a Super Bowl. He was the most consistent part of your passing game in the playoffs. Even considering all the ups and downs they had through the air, he was consistent. I don't know. I think it would be a mistake to just be hell-bent on moving off him. If they do it, and we know he wanted a number 1, number 2 ranked contract at this position, you can get a good draft pick and you're going to draft somebody early, I guess I'll understand. But I think your team's a lot worse next year if Dallas Goedert's not on this offense. And I think you can do both things. You can find that long-term replacement and find a middle ground contract for a 3-year extension. Like, I don't think, even though you've regretted it in the past, I don't think you're going to regret at the end of those 3 years giving Dallas Goedert that extension. I think you can still get like 2 to 3 really good years left of this football player. I don't know. That's at least how I see it. It's going to be one of the few moves Howie Roseman can make this year where I would not be happy with a certain outcome. I will not be happy unless they get a first, second, or third round pick for him. I'm not going to be happy if Dallas Goedert's gone. If they do trade him, they are 100% drafting a tight end in the first or second round, right? I mean, you have to, because at that point, the offense already was so dependent on 2 to 3 players. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. If you lose Dallas Goedert, like, you got to bring in somebody. And Jahan Dotson is suddenly a lot more important. His role next year is very important. And I could even see them making a bigger move at wide receiver than we think if this scenario plays out. Because they have to, that's a lot of targets you have to replace. Like, you want that third guy next to Brown and Smith. Maybe it's Dotson. Maybe it's another receiver. But I think if Goedert is traded, I would bet so much money that one of those first 2 picks is, Colson Loveland or Mason Taylor or, Gunnar Helm, Elijah Arroyo, Harold Fannin, one of those top 5 tight end prospects. I'd bet a lot of money on one of them being a Philadelphia Eagle by the end of next month. We'll see. My take on it, I'd understand the business side of it, the logic behind it, the head part of it. My heart's saying do not trade Dallas Goedert. Like, I want him on this football team in 2024, 2025. I would try to make it work. Try to find that middle ground. We'll see what happens. Tomorrow's going to be a crazy day across the NFL. Today was too. Coming up next to wrap up today's show, I'm going to predict what I think the Eagles are going to do tomorrow. The first big move I think you can bank on. I'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This Monday edition of Locked On Eagles that we're recording a little early on a Sunday night is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here. It's March already, which is unbelievable. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers, you can get $200. That's right, 2 bennies in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 and extra money to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year for the tournament. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there is almost something all the time exciting going on to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple and easy to use. When I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. Just visit FanDuel.com. Get in on the college hoops action all tournament long with FanDuel. All right, the legal tampering window opens up tomorrow. Howie Roseman's already been busy. Released James Bradbury and Darius Slay, extended the contracts of two of the best signings he's ever made from the 2024 offseason, which I don't think there's any way Howie tops what he did last year. I don't know if a GM will ever top what Howie did last year. It might be the best run a general manager had in a single offseason in the history of the NFL. I mean, he just pretty much hit on everything except for Bryce Huff, and I still think there's a chance Bryce Huff can be good. I'm a little more bullish on that, as you guys know, than most. But tomorrow, he's going to do more. We'll see if there's a middle ground that he can come to with Dallas Goedert. Maybe he'll trade the tight end. Maybe suddenly Josh Sweat's market isn't as big as we thought, and an extension in Philadelphia is possible. I think Milton Williams, Mekhi Becton, I'll predict they're as good as gone. I just cannot see a scenario where those two are back, unless Becton really takes a team-friendly deal and prioritizes the situation, the support of Jeff Stoutland, of the star offensive linemen around him, of understanding the grass isn't always greener, like looking back to his days with the New York Jets, almost like that PTSD saying, I don't want to risk going through that again. If that happens, I could see Mekhi Becton coming back, but I think his market, again, Pete Prisco said today from CBS that the guard market is going to be crazy, where a lot of good players but aren't necessarily great are going to get huge contracts. And I could totally see that. Like, I think you're seeing in the NFL now, guards and tackles, like guards and defensive tackles, they're starting to get money that normally you just see with edge rushers and offensive tackles. Like, we are prioritizing the trenches, the guts of the trenches in the NFL nowadays. Like, people want star guards. And the reason the guard market is blowing up is because the defensive tackle market started blowing up first. Teams are getting elite pass rushers on the interior now like you didn't see before in the NFL. And it makes having Landon Dickerson type of guards, Mekhi Becton type of talents on the inside, all that more important. So it goes hand in hand that both of these markets are blowing up. And so with that being said, Mekhi Becton's market might be just so big, and it's not a super deep class of free agents at guard, that a lot of teams might be vying for these 4 or 5 players' services. And unlike Josh Sweat's situation where it's an oversaturated market on the edge, the guard market might be the opposite. And just with the trade war that's going to be going on, or the negotiation just going through the roof, the auction for these guys, it's going to raise their value. And I just don't know if Philadelphia is going to be close to getting in on that fight. They shouldn't be. Even as much as I like Mekhi Becton and would love him back next year, they've proven with Jeff Stoutland that they can plug and play most players at right guard and be just fine. And you already have 4 players on this offensive line. I think soon 4, 3 right now, 4 eventually with the Cam Jurgens contract, where those guys are getting paid top 10 money for their position. You can't do that for all 5 positions. I don't think they'll get in on that for Mekhi Becton. They'll probably start Tyler Steen or draft somebody or try another Mekhi Becton-like experiment where you sign another veteran that's fallen out of favor somewhere. You trade for a player like that, and you add another member of Stoutland University. I think that's pretty likely tomorrow. I think Milton Williams is gone. I could totally see a team like the Carolina Panthers paying that guy $22, $23 million a year. I'll say they're gone. I still will say Josh Sweat is not back, but I suddenly think that's the most likely scenario of those guys returning. It's Josh Sweat, which is literally the opposite of what I've thought the last few weeks. I thought he was the least likely to come back. Now I think he's the most likely. But I will say at edge, the Eagles do something. I think it'd be Malcolm Kuntz. I think of all the options that are out there, Malcolm Kuntz makes the most sense. He's 26 years old. He's coming off a season-ending injury from last September. He had a career year in 2023 with 8 sacks in Vegas, opposite Max Crosby. He might want to sign a short-term prove-it deal, right? He sees the oversaturated market. He sees that he was injured all of last year. This might be where his value is the lowest. If he has a breakout year, he might bet on himself, sign a 1-year type of deal like Josh Sweat did last year, see how Josh Sweat did in Philadelphia and how that paid off, bank on himself, come to Philadelphia. I think Malcolm Kuntz is the prediction for me. Even though I think there's a chance now Josh Sweat's back, I'll say if there's one guy the Eagles bring in from another team tomorrow, it's Malcolm Kuntz. I could also see like a Darrell Taylor type from the Chicago Bears, played under Clint Hurt in Seattle. That was my guy a few years ago in the NFL draft coming out of Tennessee that I'd like to see. But I think Malcolm Kuntz makes the most sense for tomorrow if the Eagles make an outside move. We'll see too, though. There's smaller guys to keep an eye on. Oren Burks, I could totally see an extension getting done. Isaiah Rodgers, it sounds like his market is going to be more lucrative than we thought. The Carolina Panthers sound interested. The Raiders, the Bears. It sounds like teams took notice of Rodgers playing pretty well when he had to come in a lot last year for Darius Slay at times. Again, a top-tier speed corner in the NFL, sub 4.3, sub 4.4 type of player. Good returner as well. He's young in his prime at 27. I think Isaiah Rodgers could have a big market. We'll see what happens. It's going to be nuts. But again, gun to my head, what happens tomorrow? My final predictions. Josh Sweat, maybe he's back. Not sure. Mekhi Becton's gone. Milton Williams is gone. The Eagles sign one guy from another team. It's going to be former Las Vegas Raiders edge rusher Malcolm Kuntz. But we'll see what happens. I'll have a recap show for you. We're going to post pretty much all these episodes this week a little bit early to recap the flurry of reports and news that we get. I'll do a show right after the end of the day. All of the news breaks right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. So make sure you're subscribing. This is one of the busiest weeks of the NFL year. One of my favorite days of the year is tomorrow. I love Tampering Day. We'll have a show for you tomorrow, and then 3 other episodes this week on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. I'm going to get this recording done so I can post it, because who knows, with all the moves dropping, there might be something the Eagles just did, and I don't even know yet. So I'm going to get out of here. Thanks as always for making us your first listen every day. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.